Hello everyone, my name is Borax and I've been on a mission to play and rate every single champion in the support role. Today we'll be looking at one of my favorite ADCs to play, Caitlyn. Let's quickly go over her abilities and then find out why she could work as a support. She has her passive, which grants Caitlyn stacks every time she basic attacks. At 6 stacks, her next AA deals bonus damage and consumes all stacks. When you are sitting in a bush, Caitlyn will gain 2 stacks per auto attack. Also, I will mention that while this isn't a passive or anything, Caitlyn has the longest auto attack range level 1, which is very useful for trading. Next she has her Q, which gives her a piercing shot in a target direction, dealing damage. The first enemy hit takes full damage, but all enemies hit afterward take 50% damage, but the projectile widens. Then Caitlyn has her W, allowing her to place 3 traps level 1, increasing to 5 traps at max rank. She's also able to stack charges of her W, meaning you can spam a bunch of them at once. Enemies that step on a trap get rooted for 1.5 seconds, revealed for 3 seconds, and take additional damage from headshot, while also giving her a headshot against the opponent that has increased range. Opponents also become immune to other traps for 3 seconds. Something that I just learned is that enemies that are revealed by Yordle's snap trap will also take full damage from her Q even if they aren't the first target hit, which is such a bizarre mechanic and the reason why I like looking over the abilities real quick. Next she has her E, which fires a net in a target direction, causing Caitlyn to recoil in the opposite direction. The net deals magic damage, slows enemies hit by 50%, and grants her a headshot with bonus range against enemies she hits. Finally, she has her ultimate, which is an extremely long range ability that allows her to lock onto an enemy champion, which, after a 1-second channel, will be hit by a homing bullet that can be blocked by allied champions. Caitlyn is traditionally an ADC, so she shouldn't be good as a support, right? Well, this pick was actually popularized by SKT's support Kyria, who picked it about a month or 2 ago and was able to win games. So can this champion thrive in the bot lane in a new way? Well, let's find out together, as I rate Caitlyn, the Sheriff of Piltover, on her ability to be played in the support role.
I'm on the case.
In the early game, I like to rate a support's ability to invade, lane, and roam. Caitlyn is a very strong champion level 1 with her long range and passive, but she has no real CC that you want to start with, as it's not good enough to justify taking over your Q. For starting an invade, Caitlyn gets an F, but she's actually like a B in the counter invade because few champions will hit harder than her in that level 1 scrap. So ultimately, I'll give her a D rating for this category. You need other members on your team to have a lot of CC to justify actually looking for an invade, but if you do have that, then she can provide the damage for your team. Now let's talk about laning, where I like to judge a champion based on 3 categories: poking, peeling, and all-inning. Truthfully, the only reason you pick Caitlyn's support is for her ability to poke and establish lane dominance. In fact, what you want to do is just run at the enemies level 1 and start hitting them with your ADC because there's almost no way to lose. I mean, if your Varus plays 8 screens away and doesn't press any abilities or heal, then you will lose the scrap, which sucks. So you really have to make sure your ADC is on the same page if you want this pick to succeed. If you can't get the level 1 cheese off with using Hail of Blades, Barrier, and high amounts of early game damage to get a kill, or at least zone the enemies, then you might as well FF, because this pick is truly won or lost at that level 1 scrap. Okay, I'll try to be less dramatic. You can still do alright post level 1 by looking for random long autos, especially when your headshot is ready. You also want to be throwing out your Q, which isn't the easiest to land, but does a lot of damage. And if you can get a headshot from your trap or net, then you really are chillin'. Now, there is a reason why Kyria is really the only pro who's able to pick Caitlyn's support because, well, he's really good at the game, and you have to understand your range advantage so that the enemies can't trade on you, which, as a support main, I struggle with for sure, which isn't great as Caitlyn is a support that deals more damage with autos than abilities. For poking, I will give her an S-. She truly does a lot of damage with Hail of Blades and autos, but there are other supports that can just throw out these huge spells from millions of miles away and poke for free that I think are better than Caitlyn, but if you and your lane partner are playing well together, you can truly dominate a lane with your damage and make your opponents experience a living nightmare, forcing them to hug their tower and to pray for dear life that you don't have your ultimate yet, because if you do and they are ever low, well, thanks for the gold, buddy. Okay, if you're a huge Caitlyn support fan, or just a Caitlyn fan in general, then it's time to turn off the video because it really only goes downhill from here. You see, with all of these double ADC bot lanes, you should be able to keep the enemies under their tower, but that means you are really vulnerable to ganks, which Caitlyn can try to prevent with her traps in a bush, or she can try to get away with her net. But these abilities are not very reliable, and if your ADC is in trouble, your best bet of peeling is either to abandon them or try and fight out the situation so that you can at least trade. If you're playing against a heavy engage support, you better hope they are bad or you have really fancy feet, because if they ever blow your flash, the next engage will most likely be certain death if you don't have a massive lead. For peeling, I will give Caitlyn Support a D-. It is pretty terrible, but at least she does have her traps for extra vision and the potential to outplay with her net and barrier. But it's by no means good, and is the reason why one death can quickly turn into chain feeding. Finally, all inning, my favorite category and something Caitlyn can actually do fairly well. But not in the exciting, I hit a crazy hook or ability, but rather in the enemy missed an ability so I can just walk up and right click them until they die, and if they are low enough and I'm level 6, I can get a kill. Playing this pick, I realized something. You really need to establish a healthy bot lane and get your jungler to come down to dive your opponents to deny them minions and let you get tower plates, because if you don't smash your lane, this pick is so bad. Without your jungler's help, you can't ever really force the issue, as you have no real hard CC besides trap, and trap needs a second after you place it for it to be CC ready. For all inning, I will give Caitlyn a C. Her being able to win fights by just autoing people down is no joke and will truly catch people off guard. The only problem is you really need your ADC to understand that this is your plan and be able to follow up, because the fights will be impossible without their help, as Caitlyn can't truly 1v2 early on as she doesn't have enough burst by herself. Now that we've talked about Caitlyn's laning prowess, let's rate the matchups that she might have to face. The hardest champions to play against are the ones that have engage, which isn't too difficult to land, that could lead to you chain inting your lane and ruining your entire game. While a champion like Heimerdinger might not sound too bad because of Caitlyn's range, he is able to establish bush control quite easily, and with Caitlyn's support, you do really want to establish push in order to be useful. Now earlier in the poking section, I didn't give Caitlyn an S+, because I find that these mages can just deal damage a lot easier, and more importantly, have CC tools that if they ever land on the Caitlyn, she can get severely chunked out. So, if you're able to dodge every ability that they just throw out, then you can win by just autoing them, but one mistake and the lane is just over. Now we have a bunch of melee supports who are pretty weak early levels, or can have their abilities be blocked by minions easier, so Caitlyn can win levels 1 through 3 pretty hard. But again, if they do ever get on top of you, it is also game over, which might make me sound like a broken record, but it's just the truth. Caitlyn, in my opinion, actually struggles against Ashe, as she has range close to Caitlyn's, but more importantly has her W to poke for free and a more useful ult later on. You'd be able to dominate a Twitch support in lane for sure, but he's just going to roam on you and then come back to your lane and bop you with a few items. Karma is the enchanter that would scare me the most because of her early laning damage. But the other enchanters will be your best targets to punish in lane and deny CS from your opponents, because as long as your ADC is willing to scrap with you, then you will be able to really dominate them early on and frustrate them. That being said, you will have to be scared of ganks, so make sure you ward up so that you can play super aggressively and get some tower plates. Finally, we have a bunch of champions in the who plays these guys even, as I'm waiting to see people pick these characters in my games. But truthfully, a Caitlyn support would lose to most of these matchups pretty hard. When it comes to what ADCs you want to play with, the combos that I can think of as being decent are champions that want to scrap early on or can take Hail of Blades to help you out early. Champions like Varus, Jhin, and Ashe come to mind, as they all provide good range, early damage potential, and more importantly, a bit of CC, which Caitlyn really lacks but can play off of by placing a trap on someone that is crowd controlled to really blow them up. However, if your ADC is a useless bonobo, then you might want to consider roaming from time to time, so let's talk about that now. Now, I personally really enjoy roaming, which is why most supports I enjoy are usually able to do so. And surprisingly, Caitlyn does actually have some potential, even though she is a marksman. Okay, to be fair, it's mostly once she's level 6 and can use that ultimate ability to impact fights that are happening far away. While it is a nice surprise for your team to catch opponents off guard, the damage isn't too crazy, which is very disappointing and can only finish off the lowest of opponents. For roaming, I will give Caitlyn a C-. The ultimate is definitely nice, and her early game strength is decent for skirmishes, but her lack of meaningful CC or serious mobility also makes her a great target to be picked off, so roaming can be quite scary for the old Caitlyn. Let's give Caitlyn a rating for her ability to support in the early game, which will slot at a C+. I know, I'm honestly surprised myself, but I really was not impressed with the pick. Sure, you can be a real nuisance early on and deal some serious damage, but if your team doesn't play around your lane, which let's be honest, they almost never do, it's so easy for this pick to get punished by one simple roam or gank, and once you're behind, it's really rough. I do wonder though, maybe Caitlyn's support feels a bit better when it comes to the...
I will not tolerate lawlessness.
In the late game, responsibilities of a support like to rate include the ability to get picks into teamfight. In order to get picks, you usually have to be able to catch up to people and stop them from getting away, which are two things Caitlyn can't really do well. The only thing she can truly provide is her ultimate, which might prevent someone who is 1 HP from getting away, but once again I wasn't too impressed with the damage overall. I'll give her a D+ for this category. You could put some traps and bushes you expect people to walk into when looking to do an objective, which isn't a bad way to get a pick, but the fact that you are way more likely to be the one getting picked and actually need your team to protect you a lot prevents me from putting her any higher. Now let's talk about team fighting, where support's responsibilities include engaging, peeling, and sometimes dealing damage. For engaging, Caitlyn gets an F. The only real engage I see as being possible is a flash net combo to slow someone by 50%, but dear lord is that a reach when it comes to engaging, and is so unreliable I shouldn't even mention it. I will say though, if somehow someone on the enemy team is in Zanya's or is being CC'd, you can extend their CC by placing a trap on them, which is alright, but definitely not great. Like I talked about in getting picks, more often than not, Caitlyn will be the one who needs to be peeled for, which isn't a great situation for your team. The best thing Caitlyn can do is set up traps for her team around an objective to know that there is one area that is safe. But this is very conditional, where you need to be the first one at an objective, and if you get flanked or they can get around the traps, the only thing you can do is deal some damage or have that net slow, which is very so I'll give her a D- here. The traps are indeed very nice, but not nice enough if that's all she can do. Now dealing damage. A specialty of ADCs, meaning Caitlyn should be pretty high here, right? Well, truth be told, I was not very impressed at all in the later stages of the game. I think lethality builds are kind of subpar, and I was always relatively broke as Caitlyn support, so having a lethality build while being behind is not a great combination. I'd have a couple of kills, and throw out my ult, and do a maximum of 20% damage to a squishy target, which is very subpar, and when that is supposed to be your main purpose. That being said, if you could throw out Qs for free and hit people with them, it does deal decent damage, and her long range does mean she'll be able to get a lot of autos off if her team is able to peel. But still, I'm only going to give her an A- in this category. I think most AP poke supports can deal more damage with their more consistent abilities and better builds, and she isn't able to get consistently fed like some cheesy supports out there, as not having CC really makes it difficult for her to force plays. Before we rate Caitlyn's overall ability to support, let's take a look at the runes and items that I would recommend. Now the most consistent keystone that the pros were using, especially when it was broken, was Hail of Blades to make you be able to really win those early scraps with the increased attack speed. Then you want to take Taste of Blood, as that's the best one you can consistently use, Zombie Ward as you'll be clearing a ton of vision, and finally Treasure Hunter, because while I do want to take Ultimate Hunter as Caitlyn's ult is so fun to use, you really do need to find a way to get extra gold. Secondarily, you pretty much need Biscuit Delivery to be as aggressive as possible in lane, and then Cosmic Insight for more wards and lower summoner spell cooldown to help you survive. Now while that is the traditional rune page, it's not the one I enjoyed the most, and maybe it's just because I'm bad at weaving in autos consistently. Anyways, the keystone I really liked using was First Strike, as will empower your ultimate throughout the game, and like I've said, you really do want to farm as much gold as possible and cheat the system, which this rune does let you kind of do. So if I ever feel like picking the support again, I will definitely keep trying First Strike and even allow myself to go Ultimate Hunter, just to maximize the dopamine I get from hearing the gold come in from using my ulti on targets. Now let's talk about items. For your gold income item, Spectral Sickle is your only choice, unless you're completely unhinged and want to play AP Caitlyn because her net scales 80%. But for the sake of your team, please don't. Now I think the most traditional build would be to get early tier 1 boots, then rush an Umbral Glaive to start denying vision to the enemy team, and upgrading to Ionian Boots of Lucidity to give you some CDR, which is the build path I'd probably recommend as well if you really want to win. Now a way worse build, but one that is my guilty pleasure, is to return to base and to pick up an early tier so you can spam out Qs and work towards building a mana Zane so that your abilities will do more damage. But honestly, you still won't do that much damage, so don't do this. Unless of course you have a huge lead and like having fun. Now frequently after Umbral Glaive, pros were building Yumu's Ghostblade. I'm assuming to get around the map faster, which isn't a bad idea. Or you could look to build towards a Mythic, which I think Duskblade will be your best bet to give you some CDR, and the effect of turning invisible isn't bad in keeping you alive. If you have a bunch of gold, which I never ended up having as most of my Kate games ended in disaster, you can go for Edge of Night for more survivability, or Serpent's Fang if the enemy team has a bunch of shields. Now I have been complaining a bunch about how building lethality isn't a great feeling on Caitlyn, so you might be asking yourself, why don't I just build crit? Well, the problem with crit items is that they are so expensive, and you really don't get a lot of gold from the support role in most games, and crit items only really hit hard once you have like 3 of them. The only crit item I would recommend is RFC, as it is fairly cheap, and the effect of getting more range is nice for you to poke from time to time from safety before teamfights. Now that we've talked about the runes and items, let's give Caitlyn an overall rating for her ability to support, which will slot at a C-. I really thought that coming into this video I'd be rating her higher up, but I truly was not impressed with the pick overall. I mean, sure, I can see the merit of potentially winning lane with her range and diving the enemies under tower, but is that actually ever happening in our games? This support pick feels like a win more champion, which isn't too bad. But if you are already going to win, then does this champion really matter, and couldn't you just play something better? Would I recommend you play Caitlyn Support? I mean, sure, she's still somewhat useful and going to do alright early on in the game, but if you hate dying a lot or love winning, maybe avoid this pick. And yes, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not great at ADCs, so my KDAs that I'm posting are partially my fault. If you look at the pros scorelines on this pick though, you can also see that they struggled quite a bit, which is funny to see. I'm still shocked that I'd much rather play a Tristan or a Sean support than Caitlyn, but after trying both, I just think they are way better at getting kills and running a game without needing your team to smurf as well. She's still quite fun, I will say, and has a unique playstyle of taking barrier to bait out opponents, but she just simply didn't provide as much utility as most other champions that I've tried out, so I won't be rating her any higher. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and leave it a like, that'd be amazing, and if you would consider subscribing, that would make my day. We also have a Discord, link in the description, so feel free to check that one out if you want to chat. Again, thanks for watching. I want to wish you good luck and have fun if you're playing Caitlyn Support yourself. You will probably need it.